Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us for our panel today on the imposter syndrome. And don't pretend you've never felt it. We've all felt it at some time in our lives. My name is Kerrie Finch, and I'm the founding partner at Future Factor. We're a communications consultancy, and we're based in Amsterdam, London, and Los Angeles, and we help our clients shape and sustain a leadership position. Now, we have three excellent speakers with us today, and we're going to be talking about all things imposter syndrome, how to overcome it, and what is it anyway. We have Cathy O'Dowd, who is a top mountaineer, an author, and also a motivational speaker. Now, Cathy is the first South African to have climbed Everest, and she's also the first woman to have climbed from both sides. Quite the achievement. And she's also written the book Just for the Love of It, which is all about her adventures and expeditions. We have with us Bernice Thijm, and Bernice is an inclusion strategist and a team performance coach. She's got over 20 years experience guiding and leading teams, and she focuses on creating inclusive workplaces. And we also have with us Seraydarian, who is the Executive Director at the Boulder Center for Resilience. She's got a background actually as a hydrogeologist. Don't let that put you off. She's also coaching professionals these days in performance resilience and community resilience. And what she focuses on is climate crisis and socio-political instability. That's where the hydrogeologist experience comes in, I'm sure. She also is part of the mountain rescue team in Colorado, or at least did that for many years. So there's always some synergy going on there with Cathy already. Let's cut to the chase. Let's start with you, Bernice. Can you explain to us what is imposter syndrome, and does everybody actually experience it?
Oh, most definitely, yes. So imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which someone constantly doubts their own achievements and their own talents. So you might think that they get a promotion and they have some success. They would say, yeah, I'm just lucky, or I really don't deserve this. So they're constantly afraid of being exposed as a fraud. And the reasoning behind that, or the reason why it occurs for people, differs, of course. But just to give you two quick examples, for instance, someone might have been brought up by very demanding parents or had very strict teachers, and every time they did a test, they got the feedback, well, yeah, you could have done better, or yeah, do it better next time. So it was never good enough. Or another example, and this is something I see a lot with entrepreneurs, is that they have this great idea, that great idea turns into a company, and somewhere along the way, they feel like they're way out of their depth. Like, I have no idea how to run a company, and people are going to think I'm a fraud, which is kind of silly because their great idea was the first place that it became a company. But so people experience it differently, and it appears differently for people.
Thank you for that. Cathy, you must have felt at some point on your expeditions while climbing Mount Everest and amongst other summits out of your depth. How did imposter syndrome strike you? We've talked about it previously, and you've got some excellent examples of working with the team and how it might have manifested itself.
I think imposter syndrome is particularly tough for anybody who's kind of doing minority representation in some form. I got onto my first Everest expedition as the token woman.
Right.
And suddenly you're carrying the burden of not just being yourself, but of being the representative of every woman in the planet, which is why you should never only have one person on your teams.
That's a big burden on anybody's shoulders.
It's huge. And then I sort of already trapped in feeling I have to prove my reason for being on this team, that it's about merit, it's not just about my category. That's when that feeling comes in. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm a token placement. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I'm letting down every other woman in the planet if I don't. You know, you can spiral into being crushed by how inadequate you feel.
it can spiral out of control. How did that present itself when you were actually on your expedition and you were climbing Everest, and you were the what you say, the token woman at one point on a particular team? How did that make you feel?
It was interesting. I think there are two interesting points. One is that although there was a good deal of sexism and tokenism at the beginning, I possibly hung on to it long after the people I was with were like, she's great, she's fine, she knows what she's doing, brilliant, let's go. So I had to let go of it just as much as anybody else on the team had to let go of it, the tokenism. The other thing I really did have to learn to do was to speak out.
Right.
Not wait to be invited to join the conversation, because that really doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to learn to put your elbows out, create your own space, and step confidently, forthrightly into the conversation and start to contribute. So that was my biggest takeaway.
Right. So it's about being part of the team, basically, and feeling like you warrant that place. Laura, you've done a lot of work around community as well as independent work around resilience. Where does imposter syndrome and resilience, where do they come into play with each other? What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to community, kind of similar to what Bernice was saying about our upbringing, when we have experiences that we kind of hold and take with us. And then kind of in life, as we become part of communities, whether it be our work or the town we live in, or a team, we start to get feedback from other people. And so if our community is resilient, and I can tell you a little bit more about that, if our community is resilient and supporting us, allowing us to take those steps forward, allowing us to kind of make that elbow room and let us move forward, we're much less apt to feel the intensity of imposter syndrome. And I think that also kind of speaks to personal resilience, is when, how do we work with our own mind and our body when we have those feelings coming up? So safe failure is a thing that comes up with both community and personally. So in the workplace, failure,
you say?
Safe failure, yeah. So if we're able to fail safely, which is how we speak about it in terms of resilience in a community, let's say our workplace. Let's say we have a really great idea and we want to try it out, and we have a manager, a boss, and a community around us that allows us to take those steps forward without it being catastrophic failure. So our communities can create a space for us to kind of go out on that limb, so to speak, without it being catastrophic. So when it comes to community, there's so many things we can put in place through supporting, through communication, and through really encouraging people to try, and setting up systems that if it doesn't work out in the best possible way, it's okay, you'll have a soft landing. I think when it comes to personal resilience, there's things that are internal kind of structure, like both mental, emotional, and physical. And I think one thing I'll say just for now is that language is really important. So the way that we talk to ourselves, our inner language, the way that we communicate with others, verbally and in writing. So I have a practice of, if I write an email, say I have something going on that's really important, I'm writing an email, I'm going to look at it and say, what am I kind of putting out to the world, and how can I really shift my language and my writing so that my mind will kind of catch up with me, so it will help me work through any fears I'm having.
Yeah, that's a really good tactic. Cathy, how do you employ something like that when you're actually on the job and you're in a very dangerous situation, halfway up a summit, and you're working with the team? You've got to rely on other people and trust yourself as well. How do you turn what might be negative into something more positive?
Well, I think managing your language is an incredibly important point. And certainly the things that I do is stop apologizing and stop saying, I'm just asking. Okay. Stop minimizing. Step forward and own the space as you ask for something or give instructions or present a suggestion. Present it in the best, most possible, most confident light. Because people follow your lead. And if you bring an idea to the group confidently, that's where you'll start from. They may come up with problems with it, but nevertheless, that's where your starting point. If you bring it to them hesitantly, negatively undercutting it before you've even finished presenting it, that's where the group will start from. So that's important. I think the other thing that's then important is to be an active participant in managing the flow between the group. When things go wrong on mountains and you have to make decisions under acute pressure very quickly and you don't have the time for a detailed debate, that only works if the team has built confidence and trust and mutual respect during the good times. So in crisis, it will all come back to bite you. If you were behaving badly in the good times, it'll only get worse. But if you've built respect, that will stay with you.
That's really, really such a good insight. And Bernice, how do you work with trust and respect in teams when in more traditional, let's say, more office environments, shall we say?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it surprises me that a lot of it sounds so similar. Like, I feel like we're all up on the mountain. Because in the workplace, of course, you also need to build that trust and you have that psychological safety. Do you dare ask questions? Do you dare to bring out your perspective and you're the only one? All those types of things are all tied up in that. And when Cathy was talking, I was also thinking about something else that you can do on a personal level, especially in the workplace, is that if you have that feeling that we call imposter syndrome, it is a useful tool that you can use to ask yourself, well, why am I feeling this? And does it mean that I need to prepare more? Do I need to ask my colleagues for help? Do I need to do more research? So I use it also as a tool to help me get to the area that I need to focus on, because I'm insecure for whatever reason. And I can do something about that if I just ask myself, why do I have this feeling? So I think that is important also in the workplace. And like Laura also said, it takes courage. It takes courage to be uncomfortable, and it takes courage to ask those questions when you don't feel comfortable.
So that's a question for everybody about discomfort and about courage and embracing your discomfort. And one way of putting that, I guess, is, how to embrace failing forwards. What kind of examples or can you give us of good ways to embrace that, to embrace failing forwards? I'm sure you've all got excellent examples of things that have happened to you all in that scenario. Maybe Laura, what's your thinking there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things with resilience is a lot about embracing discomfort and the unknown. I mean, I think that as humans, we can have a sense of perceived security if we know these things, that we'll understand how something will work out. And the truth is that we don't ever really know how something's going to work out. And kind of sitting with that discomfort is really important. So for me, one tool that I use is really somatic. So it's really going to the body. So when we've asked the questions like Bernice said, and what Cathy and I were talking about language, we could do those things. We can use language. We can ask ourselves the questions, and we can kind of bring forth that logic to kind of break it down and understand, is this a competency thing? Is there a skill that I really need to hone? Is there something really there? Or is it pure fear? I have everything I need to do what it takes. And so when it comes to fear, that's really a body, it's really a cellular level. And that comes from all kinds of things we've experienced in our lives. And so when I'm feeling fear, if something is coming up and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling afraid, first is to recognize I feel afraid, and checking in with our body. So kind of taking some deep breaths and going, what is my body feeling? Does my chest feel tight? Is my back aching? Kind of what are those things? And so I think the more that we're in tune with our body and can just recognize that I'm actually in fact in fear, we're then able to have that information and move forward.
Yeah.
And there's multiple things you can do. Yeah.
And fear does come from not knowing often. And Cathy, you talked about, you have a great belief in problem solving via, we'll work it out when it happens, is how you put it before. Tell us about that, how you overcome fear and you overcome problems, in the moment.
Yes, for me, the best way to deal with uncertainty And I think that's a key part of imposter syndrome. It's feeling you're in an environment where you feel out of control. You're not sure what's going to happen next, and you're not sure you're going to be able to cope when it happens. Is approaching it with an attitude of confidence, not in knowing what's going to happen, but confidence in your own skill set. So skills and then adaptability. So in a lot of times we try and work out what possible problems might happen, but there's so much we can't predict. Yeah. And luck is a real issue. Bad luck happens, and then you have to deal with it. So there are a lot of things where we're going to say, we'll work it out when we get there, but that's a reasonable thing to say because we arrive with a deep bench of experience and a varied skill set. So how, if you've got imposter syndrome, how do you feel confident in that skill set, in that previous experience? I think that's about being, kind of honest and positive about what you've done before in the world. You ended up in this role on this team for a reason, and owning your previous experience, owning problems you've solved before, owning ways you failed and survived. That's important too. On a mountain, if you're certain you're going to get to the summit, it's a pretty easy mountain. Right. You're trying something that's genuinely challenging, then there's absolutely a possibility that you might fail, and you need to fail safely, not get anybody killed.
That's such good advice.
And if I may add something as well, I feel that also from the workplace perspective, communication is very important. So when we get the sense of the imposter syndrome, we tend to freeze. And if we don't freeze and just say, well, you know what, I'm not certain about this, or how do you feel about this? Just communicate what you're feeling, but also be curious about what other people are thinking. Keep the communication flowing. In my experience, is also a very good way to deal with that as well.
Yeah, that must be so good up a mountain. That must be so good.
I was talking about the workplace. I was talking about the workplace.
All I'm thinking about is being up a mountain now. That's I'm gonna just go with what would Cathy do. That's going to be my new mantra. Laura, tell us about some of the other practical ways that you think embracing a practice of well, may not be a practice of resilience, but how would you advise being able to overcome your lack of confidence or that fear factor that every now and again all of us, have present in our lives?
Yeah, and I think the point that Cathy made, that having that inner confidence, which certainly there's so many ways that you can really cultivate that, and it can go really deep into your psychology, which would take quite a long time to really talk about. But I think with resilience, one of the top characteristics of resilience people is that they have an inner knowing, and sometimes we need to get it from other people. We need support. We need being resourced is really important. Sometimes if we're not feeling that way, can someone else support us in that? But that inner knowing of confidence, and I'm going to make a mountain reference because Cathy's just got me thinking that way, but I'm a rock climber, and when I'm rock climbing, if I'm going to make a move and I'm kind of assessing my risk, going, do I have this or not? Okay, I'm in the right place. I understand if I fall, what's going to happen. I have that sorted. If I tell myself in my mind, I've got this move, I stick it. If I tell myself, I don't know if I have this move, the chances of me sticking it are very low. So I think that inner knowing is so key. And like, again, resilient people tend to have an overall positive outlook and an inner knowing, even if it's buried deep, but we really know at the end of the day, we've got this and we can do this.
Bernice, I mean, because we're needing to wrap up, what would be the top 3 tips that we'd give to anybody who's having a moment of imposter syndrome? What would be the 3 things that people can do right there in the moment to shake it out?
Well, the first one is to embrace it. Don't say, well, I'm going to pretend it's not there, because if you pretend it's not there, it's only going to grow stronger. So embrace it and breathe through it. So don't freeze. Like I said, keep communicating, maybe out loud, like I feel tense, ask a question, don't freeze. And also remember that you can do this, like Laura and Cathy also said. Just remember that you can actually do this because you're not there by accident.
And Cathy, the same question to you. What would the top tips be for me feeling like an imposter because I think I might want to scale a mountain one day?
I think the important thing is you don't need to be good enough to finish the job. You don't need to be good enough to get to the summit of the mountain. You were good enough to start because you're on the team. What you need to do now is be able to learn. You need to be able to learn quickly and effectively. You need to be really curious. You need to be fully involved. And failing is going to happen. You need to fail quickly, minimal damage, and only do it once. Learn from each of those mistakes.
How do you create minimal damage? What's your tip for creating minimal damage?
Yeah, I'm writing that one down myself.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a big difference between the sort of failure where you just crumble halfway up the mountainside and leave your team to have to physically rescue you, for example.
Oh God.
And a situation where you don't get to the summit, but you do manage to turn around in time, get the team back down, make sure everybody gets down safely. So there's a wide spectrum in what gets very flippantly labeled as failure.
Okay, it makes me feel better immediately. And Laura, let's end on with you with the same question. What would be your 3 tips for overcoming your imposter syndrome, or at the very least, working through it in a positive manner?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to like in our internal structure. So when I'm in a moment, again, I want to pause. If I'm having a feeling and I can't identify, but I'm feeling like I have imposter syndrome, I want to pause. I want to sense what's happening in my body, and I want to think about the language that I'm talking to myself in my mind, and I really want to shift that. So bring some movement to my body, shift my language, think of the bigger picture, and know that in the past I've made it, I'm still alive, I'm still here, and that I'm going to be okay.
Thank you. I want to thank Cathy, Bernice and Laura. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you've learned. I've certainly learned. I'm probably decided now that I will never climb a mountain. But everybody, thank you so much for joining us on our DMEXCO session. Cathy, Bernice, Laura, and everybody who watched, thank you so much for taking part, and over and out.